Good morning, Abnormal Investigations. This is your 10 a.m. video. We're doing 2 a day so far. Not every day I'm not going to be able to do this, but I'm wanting to drop, a couple a day for a while since I've got so many that's backed up on me. I've got a lot of videos and a lot of encounters and just trying to get them out. So I hope you all are enjoying the 2 a day, and let's get into this encounter. I've lived in these woods for over 40 years. First with my wife, Mary, and then alone after she passed away. Our farmhouse has been in my family for generations, and I've always felt safe here. That was until my wife Mary passed away. At first it was just the usual noises you'd expect in the country. Owls hooting, coyotes howling, and the occasional stray animal wandering onto our property. But then things really started to change. It began with small things. I'd catch glimpses of something out of the corner of my eye, shadows moving in the woods. But whenever I turned to look, there'd be no one there. I'd hear twigs snapping in the woods, but when I went to investigate, I'd find nothing. Nothing was disturbed. Then, the night started to get weird. I'd wake up to scratching sounds at my window. At first, I thought it was just a stray animal. But then I started to notice a pattern. The scratching would always start around midnight and would last for hours. It was as if something was trying to get my attention. Now I do lay in bed at night and all I have on is my TV. I like to watch a few of my small little 30-minute shows until I fall asleep. And one night I woke up to my name being called. It was a low, raspy voice, and it sent a fear into my soul like you've never felt. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But deep down, I knew it was something more. That's when I started to notice her. I'd see her standing at the edge of the woods watching me. She was tall and imposing, with long silver hair that seemed to blend in with the trees. Her eyes were piercing, but not glowing, just an intense, unsettling stare. I knew then that I was in grave danger. I didn't feel right. I felt afraid and scared of whatever this was. I'd heard stories about werewolves, but their strength and speed, about their ability to rip a man apart with just ease. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself, but was I truly dealing with a werewolf? I decided to go see a preacher at our local church. Maybe he could help me. Maybe he could perform some kind of exorcism or blessing to protect me from the werewolf. I quickly grabbed my keys and headed out the door, driving to the church as fast as I could. When I arrived, I saw the preacher's car parked outside and I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe, just maybe, he could help me. I burst through the doors of the church, looking around frantically for the preacher. I spotted him in his office, sitting behind his desk, and I rushed over to him. "Preacher, I need your help." I was out of breath. He looked at me concerned. "What's wrong?" he asked. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. "I'm being stalked by a werewolf." I said it, trying to sound as rational as I could, while telling him it was a werewolf. The preacher's expression changed from concern to surprise. "A werewolf?" he repeated. I nodded yes. "I've seen her. I've heard her. She's been watching me, stalking me. I'm scared, preacher. I don't know what to do." The preacher leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together. "Tell me more," he said. I took another deep breath, and then I told him everything about Mary's death, about the strange occurrences, about the werewolf's appearances. I told him about the scratching at the windows, the howling in the woods, and the voice that called my name. When I finished, the preacher sat in silence for a moment, his eyes closed, and then he spoke. "I believe you," he said. "I believe that you're telling the truth, but have to ask you, son, are you prepared for what may come next?" I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I was prepared, but I didn't know. I didn't know what to expect. The preacher leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine, and he said, "We may need to perform a ritual," he said, "a ritual to protect you, to keep the werewolf at bay." I took a deep breath, stilling myself, and I said, I'm ready. I'm ready to end this nightmare." The preacher nodded, and the determined look on his face. He then looked at me and he said, "Then let us begin," he said. "First, we need to prepare. I'll need some objects from your home." And I'm not going to name the audience or the objects. He says in the story, he said, I believe this was a personal experience. I nodded, eager to do whatever it took to protect myself from the werewolf. The preacher handed me a list of items to gather, and I quickly set off to collect them. One of the items I was sure that he wanted from me was my wife's wedding ring, and mine. As I gathered the items, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched while I was at my home. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the werewolf lurking in the shadows, but every time, there was nothing there. I returned to the church, my arms laden with the items on the preacher's list. He took them from me, his eyes scanning the collection. "Good," he said. "Now let's prepare the ritual." He led me to a small room in the back of the church, a room filled with strange symbols and artifacts. He began to arrange the items I had gathered, placing them in a different pattern in the floor. They were crosses and goblets, I guess what you would call them. Not real sure, but a lot of things that were very old, it looked like. As he worked, he chanted in a low, soothing voice. The words were unfamiliar to me, but they seemed to hold a deep power. When the pattern was complete, the preacher stood up, his eyes locked on mine. "This is a ritual of protection," he explained. "It will create a barrier around you, the barrier that the werewolf will not be able to break." I nodded, feeling a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. "But you must be warned," the preacher continued. "The ritual will not last forever. You will need to repeat it regularly, and you will need to find the faith inside of yourself to create this barrier." I nodded again, determined in my heart I would do whatever it took to keep the werewolf at bay. The preacher began to chant again, his voice rising and falling. I felt a strange energy building around me, an energy that seemed to pulse with life of its own. And then in an instant the ritual was complete. The energy dissipated, leaving me feeling drained, but hopeful. The preacher smiled, his eyes warm with encouragement. The preacher smiled and said, "You are now protected. But remember, the ritual will not last forever. You will need to repeat it regularly to keep the barrier strong." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude toward the preacher. "Thank you," I said, my voice sincere. "Thank you so much for helping me." The preacher smiled again, his eyes twinkling. "You are welcome, my son," he said. May God protect you from the forces of darkness. They have chosen you. Some people are just chosen by darkness." I left the church feeling a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. I knew that the ritual would not last forever, but I was determined to repeat it regularly to keep the barrier strong. As I walked back to my farmhouse, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I knew that I was protected, at least for now. But as I approached my house, I heard a strange noise. It was a low, raspy growl, and it seemed to be coming from just outside my window again. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and then I heard my name being called. It was the werewolf, and she was back. I stood frozen in terror, my heart racing with fear, adrenaline. I had just returned from the preacher's ritual, feeling a sense of hope and protection, but now as I heard the werewolf's howl outside, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. The howl was different, this time more anguished and pained. It sent shivers all over me. I felt the cold sweat break out on my forehead, and then I heard her scream. She screamed with a howl to the top of her lungs that I cannot even tell you what it felt like. The windows even would vibrate like an earthquake if you've ever been in one. It was a sound like anything I'd ever heard before, a sound that seemed to rip through the night air like a knife. I felt the blood in my body almost curdle as if I was in agony. And then I heard her. It sounded like she was in agony. I heard her footsteps heavy and pounding as she ran through the woods. The sound grew fainter and fainter until it was just a distant echo, as if she was running hard as she could to get as far away as she could. And then there was silence. I stood there for what felt like hours. My heart was pounding in my chest. I was afraid to move, afraid to breathe. I was afraid that the werewolf would come back, that she would be angry and vengeful for what I had done. But then I began to realize she left in a huge hurry. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I had done something to hurt her, something to drive her away, and now I was left to wonder, had I made a terrible mistake? Would she return to finish me off for what I had done, for how I had hurt her? If you would have heard that scream, you would know. I hurt her terribly. She has not returned to this day, and it's been almost a year. Do you think I'm safe? Wow. I would definitely be on the lookout. I would have lights up like everybody says, the trail cams and everything. I would keep my faith. I would pray every night for protection. Psalms 91 is a good one. And don't let this thing get to you. You got to keep up your faith and keep that barrier. What do you all think? What do you think you should do? And it's interesting to me that you lost your wife and it's a female werewolf. It's almost like maybe she knows you're single. I don't know. It's kind of weird. What do you all think? Keep your head on a swivel till next time, guys. And don't be something's dinner. Thanks for listening, and if you don't mind, please smash that like button.